Welcome into episode 147 of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm Augustrometer.
The Attorney General and the Magic Door. Keeping kids off dating apps. And August will scare us into updating our Apple things.
Ooh.
Tackling security one story at a time, this is The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. The war against math continues, which is to say the call for weaker encryption that is magically not any weaker has gone up again. This time it's U.S. Attorney General William Barr asking for the impossible, a backdoor into encryption that would only work for the good guys. Remind me, August, is this possible?
No.
Okay. A piece from Apple Insider has Barr claiming the encryption of data is putting the security of America at risk by stopping law enforcement officials from being able to track criminals and calling for the creation of security-defeating backdoors that somehow do not weaken encryption. Remind me, August, is this possible?
No.
Okay. Speaking at a Fordham University conference on cybersecurity on Tuesday, according to the report, Barr suggested the use of encryption is already imposing huge costs on society and seriously degrades the ability for law enforcement to detect and prevent crime before it occurs. In investigating crimes, it is also thwarting law enforcement's ability to identify those responsible or to successfully prosecute the guilty parties. After much invoking of various boogeymen, Barr turned his attention to dogmatic pronouncements from tech firms who say encryption backdoors cannot be done. According to the Attorney General, it can be and it must be. We are confident that there are technical solutions that will allow lawful access to encrypted data and communications by law enforcement without materially weakening the security provided by encryption. Hey, remind me, August, is this possible?
I'm going to broken record this one and go, no.
Okay. See, AG Barr says tech should work on this anyway. What's wrong with that?
You know, I certainly understand the desire. Law enforcement, they've always wanted more and more information to help bring down the bad guys. And end-to-end encryption, it does make their job that much harder. But forget the ethical, legal, and technical arguments just for a second and focus on the practical. Suppose that we could build a system that had 3 keys. You know, one for you, one for the person you're talking to, and a third key that would unlock both ends of that conversation. The question is, who gets to keep that third key? Is it the government? The same government that just announced all of NASA's data was hacked? The same government who's admitted that both the FBI and CIA have had their servers hacked? And that's what the problem is. There's no safe place for a third key. If it's available to the good guys, it's also available to the bad guys, which means that even if you're a law-abiding citizen, if you're asking for a back door, you're asking for your personal data to be stolen.
Yeah, I remember it might have been Jim Comey back when he was still director of the FBI. His whole thing was, well, no, the companies will keep the key. So basically, I believe it was the FBI wanted Apple to build a backdoor into Apple stuff and Google to build a backdoor into Google stuff. And then they would actually keep the key to that back door. And so when the government needed information, they would just go to Apple and say, hey, can you unlock this door? Which is interesting because, I mean, it basically, it's like we want all of the access, but none of the responsibility of keeping this stuff safe.
Right. And you know, the thing is let's say that would work. Let's say Apple could secure that key. Google could secure that key. I've always said that if you take a $100 bill and put it in the room with a whole bunch of very honest people, sooner or later that $100 bill is going to disappear. It's just human nature. And to have a key like that and to be able to reap millions potentially from somebody who's pulled you aside and says, hey, I hear you have access to the key, That's where the problem lies.
Let me ask you a question. Let's say, I want a communications app that employs end-to-end encryption. So Attorney General Barr and FBI Director Christopher Wray, no relation, governments around the world, everybody gets what they want as far from that end, right? Apple, Google, Facebook, every company that runs apps that use end-to-end encryption, they give in, they build the backdoor that various agencies want. Could you, as a developer, build me an application that employs end-to-end encryption?
Of course. And that's what WhatsApp did originally. They focused on totally secure communications, and they did it on their own. There are a number of libraries out there that would allow you to do this, and there's no way to sort of get around that. I mean, if you come up with your own way of coding things, then who's going to stop you? It's not like Apple can build a third-party key for every single app. It's not practical.
See, this is what's crazy. I mean, that's the ball game. Terrorist organizations, criminal enterprises, even not terribly smart criminal enterprises could build such an app or could commission such an app.
Yeah, and to me, that's the crazy part, because in essence, a backdoor is only useful on law-abiding citizens, because criminals will have their own thing. Just because you outlaw drugs doesn't mean people are going to just stop importing them. Criminal organizations will find ways to communicate so they can't have their messages intercepted. Bottom line.
Am I right in thinking, Barr and company, they talk about wanting a new technology. Well, I know there's no way to weaken encryption without weakening encryption, but these calls, are they actually for new technology, or are they really just calls for watered down security? If the DOJ leans on Apple to make a backdoor for iMessage, that doesn't automatically weaken all security everywhere. It's basically a call for a 4-digit passcode on some buildings with 12-digit passcodes and reinforced locks on others.
Yeah, and, honestly, I can't see this as anything other than posturing and getting angry about something they can't control. Like I said, I understand law enforcement and where they're coming from. But the bottom line is these guys don't understand technology. They've got law degrees. They don't have engineering degrees. And they just haven't realized that the ship has sailed. But I think you're going to keep seeing technically unsophisticated people call for something that is either impossible or that jeopardizes the personal data of every single person who has an electronic device.
Well, it's time for us to have the talk. Well, have the talk about having the talk. I mean the talk. The birds and the bees, the salmon and the swimming. These days, though, the talk includes the zeros and the ones. The good people at Secure Mac have a newsletter, which I would love to suggest to you. You go to securemac.com/checklist, scroll to the bottom of the page, and you'll see a little icon of an envelope. You'll see, all kinds of icons there, things for Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that. But you'll see a little icon of an envelope. If you click that, you can sign up for their newsletter, which is filled with lots of great advice, such as the newsletter that I received yesterday, 5 ways to keep your kids off dating apps. With the rise of smartphones and the growing number of apps out there, keeping your kids safe is no longer as simple as putting the family computer in the middle of the living room. Some parents found this out the hard way last month when they discovered that their 12-year-olds had been using dating apps that were also being used by adults. There's so much wrong with that, but here's the good news. There are some simple, effective steps that you can take to make sure your kids stay off the dating apps, while they're still kids. Top of the list, use the tools that Apple has built into iOS.
It'd be great if the App Store was 100% safe, but we all know that it's not. Apple tries, but things slip through the cracks. That said, Apple does offer a whole lot of powerful parental control tools in screen time, which are in the iOS settings. And you can use the content and privacy restrictions in screen time to filter your child's web searches, limit or block app downloads, and receive alerts about their activity. I definitely recommend that you do that, because basically you create a sandbox iOS experience for your kids, and it's a safer and more age-appropriate version of the real thing.
Next thing on the list, and this honestly might be the toughest bit, believe that your kids may be on these apps. I know you remember changing their diaper, but, they get to a certain age and you think, well, they're still young, they're still innocent. And that may be, but it may not be as much as you think.
Yeah, how many 12-year-old boys have access to Playboys? Or used to, anyway,
Dude, look, I am not a parent, so these are weird things for me to talk about. That's why I'm, playing off of somebody else's newsletter here. I'll tell you, though, I was trying to think about it earlier. If I'd been 12 and had access to half the stuff that's out there today, I have no idea how much trouble I would have gotten into.
Oh, you'd be in jail.
Well, no, I'm not kidding about it, though. I mean, that's the thing. I know what I was like when I was 12. Yes, I did have access to Playboys when I was 12. And if I had had access to more than that, believe I would have been into more than that. And so now multiply that by every kid you see walking around with a smartphone. They've got access to tons of stuff as well. And nobody wants to think that their child might be into something. And I hate to be the one to say it, especially because I don't have kids myself, but your child might be into something and you kind of need to be wise to that.
Or at least open to the idea that they might be.
Yeah, yeah.
There's some big dating apps that we've all heard of: Tinder, Match, Bumble. All of these are big names, but there are less well-known apps like Fast Meet, Meet24, Meet for You, and a whole slew of others. We've talked about them here, and a lot of checklist listeners have heard about these, but most people haven't. They were the apps being used by adults and 12-year-olds with few people realizing what was going on. With millions of registered iOS developers, that's a lot of developers out there. Huge numbers of new apps are being submitted every single day to the App Store. Unfortunately, the approval process doesn't catch everything. It doesn't necessarily spot problems like apps being used by 12-year-olds for dating. So just remember, don't assume that everything in the App Store is safe. Don't just look for the household names you've heard before. If you don't recognize an app or know what it does, do some detective work before allowing it on your child's phone.
Next up, stay away from tracking software.
Oh, tracking software. We've talked about this one before multiple times. There are lots of reasons to stay away from tracking software. For one thing, the companies developing tracking software, they're doing it to make money. That means they have every incentive to collect data on your child and then sell that data to third parties. So that company will know exactly where your child is at every moment of the day. And that's some scary stuff. Second, by letting an app that collects sensitive data on your child's phone, you can accidentally create a security risk if the app developers haven't properly protected their user data. So just like all of the breaches that we've seen, that kind of stuff will happen, and it will happen with your child's data. In other words, this kind of software can create the same kind of privacy and security issues that by installing the tracking software, you were just trying to prevent. The Apple tools we mentioned earlier, plus, have a chat with your kids. These are going to almost always work better than installing software without them knowing about it.
Now, along with talking to your kids along that same line, give them an idea of the dangers that are out there. I mean, don't freak them out, but, let them know what's out there and to be careful.
Yeah, that's where it becomes tough because kids aren't stupid. Kids are actually really, really smart. but they are inexperienced. When they were little, you had to tell them not to open the door when they were home alone, not to take candy from strangers. They need these sorts of common sense guidelines when they start going online. They really do. And like you said, you don't need to freak them out.
Right.
But you should give them a realistic picture of the sorts of dangers that they're going to encounter online and what to do about them, especially what to do about them. The walk away kind of thing. And by helping them understand how to keep themselves safe, you're going to turn your children into their own best defense. And that's what you really, really want.
And then the last thing on the list, this one's really for the parents. Stay informed yourself.
If you don't know the basics of cybersecurity or how to work the security features on an iOS device, it's going to be much harder to keep your kids safe online. But learning what you need to know is easy as, say, I don't know, listening to a podcast or signing up for a newsletter, reading a few articles maybe, even going into an Apple store and asking. Staying informed with trusted sources will help you handle most of the threats you're ever likely to face.
We'll hit Apple's latest round of updates in a moment, but first, a word about MacScan 3 from Secure Mac. There is no one thing that can keep your Mac safe, not one single thing. Digital safety is about a lot of things. Being smart about passwords, taking care with what you download, using a VPN on public Wi-Fi. There are lots of things that you can do to keep yourself safe. High on the list, running good security software like MacScan 3. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It's developed by Secure Mac, trusted names in computer security and developers of exceptional security software for the Mac for well over a decade. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full-range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your computer. Stay safer with MacScan 3 from Secure Mac. Sign up for a free 30-day trial today at securemac.com/MacScan. That's MacScan 3 by Secure Mac. Your 30-day free trial is waiting at securemac.com/MacScan. Your Mac, your iPhone, your watch, all of your Apple gear got updates this week. Unless otherwise stated, we will pull all of our update news from Mac Rumors, and Mr. Augustrometer is going to do that thing he does. I know we just said you don't need to freak out.
Freak out!
But now August is going to try to freak us out into updating our stuff. We'll start with the release of macOS Mojave 10.14.6. Most notable among the updates release notes were modifications for Apple News Plus, fixing a boot camp partition issue for iMac and Mac Mini with Fusion Drive, addressing some graphics problems, and the list goes on. Additionally, Apple's security site for the update says it tackles somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 vulnerabilities. August, tell everyone one of the scary ones, won't you?
Ooh, so many spooky bugs to choose from. There's a lot on the list. Most of them stopping memory leaks and that kind of thing. But I'm going to say my favorite on the list for Mojave is the FaceTime bug that could potentially allow a remote attacker to execute arbitrary code. So basically, if somebody called you and knew what they were doing, they could do all kinds of nasty, nasty things on your device.
And there is a reason to update your Mac. But we are so far from done. If you're rocking an older version of Mac OS, Apple has not forgotten about you. The Mac Observer says Apple has released Security Update 2019-004 for Sierra and the same number for High Sierra. For both, Apple says Security Update 2019-004 is recommended for all users and improves the security of Mac OS. You can find it in the Mac App Store on machines running Sierra and High Sierra. It's also available to download directly from Apple's site. Moving away from the desktop and the laptop, the computer in your pocket got an update this week. Mac Rumors has Apple saying that the iOS 12.4 update introduces iPhone migration to directly transfer data from an old iPhone to a new iPhone, includes enhancements to Apple News Plus, and improves the security of your iPhone or iPad. Probably the most notable security fix in the mix is the one that brings the walkie-talkie app back to life on Apple Watch. Apple's security page for iOS 12.4 lists a total of 19 security fixes. August, freak me out into updating.
Panic in the streets. It's security mayhem. It looks like that nasty FaceTime bug is in iOS as well, and that's getting fixed. But for iOS, I'll pick all the crazy WebKit vulnerabilities. Sometimes I feel like I browse more on my phone than with my laptop, and both fix issues in WebKit with memory leaks, arbitrary code execution, cross-site scripting, and a ton more. And it basically just makes your whole world a lot safer when you're surfing the web. And I would update everything just for those alone.
Now, this one is not a security update exactly, but Apple did release a new version. Well, they released new versions, actually, of iOS 9.3.6 and iOS 10.3.4 this week. According to Mac Rumors, Apple released these older software updates to address an issue that could impact GPS location performance and lead to the system date and time being incorrect. Just like the rest, these updates are free. Apple recommends them for all eligible devices. Now, I mentioned earlier that iOS 12.4 fixed the walkie-talkie issue that forced Apple to disable it a couple of weeks ago. Walkie-talkie is a feature of watchOS, so you gotta figure that got updated on Monday, and it did. watchOS 5.3 brings with it the walkie-talkie bug fix. The update also turns on ECG support for Canada and Singapore on compatible watches, but what we're talking about is security. 16 security updates addressed in this one. watchOS 5.3 can be downloaded through the Watch app on an associated iPhone. August, make me want this update from a security side, please.
I'm going to steal a line from Ghostbusters. It's cats and dogs living together. Mass hysteria. Okay, that's all I got there.
Okay. Thanks for that.
One of the things I love about my watch is Apple Pay. It turns out there's a bug that could potentially allow you to complete an in-app purchase while you're on the lock screen. So download the update and stop accidentally buying Fortnite dance moves.
There is no Dana. There is only Zool. I mean, as long as we're doing random Ghostbusters lines, or yes, it's true, this man has... Finally, tvOS got updates this week as well. Mac Rumors says both the 4th and 5th gen Apple TVs were treated to tvOS 12.4. There were no new features discovered during the beta testing period for tvOS 12.4, according to the report, making it unclear what's included in the update. Unclear, that is, unless you count the 14 security issues. One last chance, sir. Please scare me into updating something.
How's this for scary? If you don't update tvOS, you will never be able to watch the Game of Thrones spin-off shows.
See, you're actually convincing me not to update tvOS at this point.
Seriously, though, all of the fixes I've mentioned so far span all of the platforms, which is very interesting to me just from kind of a watching Apple work point of view, especially since these are all supposed to be separate OSs. But if you fix, if you do all of the updates, you will get all of these fixes for all of your devices. tvOS gets those fixes too. But one bug that I haven't mentioned yet is a core data bug, which is sort of the database that Apple has come up with that developers can use within apps. And this is a bug that would allow an attacker to remotely execute code on your device. And we all know that's never a good thing. So update that sucker.
So what I hear you saying is we should update the latest versions of all the software for our Apple devices.
If you don't have automatic updates turned on, then what are you doing?
Well, I'm waiting to get the word that it's all okay, but we can have that debate for a fifth time another time. Hey, if you're looking for more security news and how-tos, the place to look is securemac.com/checklist. There you will find notes for this show, for the last show we did, for the one before that, all the way back to show number 1. The place for all of it and more is securemac.com/checklist. If you have a question you would like to ask or a topic you'd like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. And we'll talk to you next week.